They told me, "You eat, but don't help." So I packed up and left, quietly, and then I sold the house they were living in. He eats like a pig and does nothing. I'm not her caretaker. Maybe she'll take the hint and move out before I have to make her. Their words weren't tossed casually. They were sharp, deliberately cruel, meant to cut. They fell heavy in the quiet of our dinner like a stone dropped into still water, rippling through the room. Across plates of dry meatloaf and soggy peas, I stopped, my fork suspended in midair. Then, nothing. My son kept eating, eyes lowered, not a word, not even a glance my way. He didn't defend me. He didn't disagree. He didn't even flinch. His silence was louder than her cruelty. My grandson sat confused, still too young to fully grasp the situation, but he understood enough to fall quiet, the way kids do when the air becomes heavy with adult tension. I chewed. I swallowed. Then calmly, I set my fork down beside my plate. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I didn't explain that arthritis makes scrubbing impossible, or that bending brings sharp pain to my back. I didn't remind them that I still cooked when I could, folded laundry when my hands allowed it, or that I'd spent years holding this family together. Instead, I began clearing the table. That was my answer. Not rage, not tears, just the silent strength of a woman who swallowed worse than insults. That night, I lay in the room they'd turned into a guest space, more storage than sanctuary. A single bed, no closet, one small window I couldn't even look out of. Above me, the ceiling fan clicked steadily. Sleep refused to come. From the living room, I heard laughter. My son, Samantha, glasses clinking, a show on TV I couldn't name. My grandson was already asleep. I didn't cry, but something cold settled inside my chest. Not from that one insult, but from years of quiet erasure. I had been disappearing for a long time. That night only drew the line more clearly. I lay there, remembering, because that's what old women do when sleep won't come, and their stories no longer matter. I thought of my husband, and the way he died. Slow, painful, but with dignity. I'd been the one to help him keep that dignity. I washed his clothes when he had accidents. I held the spoon when his hands couldn't manage. I held the house together with tape and prayer, clipping coupons from yesterday's paper. I thought of Jason, my son, when he was little. I worked double shifts at the cleaners to afford his school supplies, sewed buttons on his shirts after midnight, cheered the loudest at his graduation, though I had to sit in the back, because we only had 2 seats, and I gave the good ones to his girlfriend. And now I was just another mouth to feed. I didn't leave the next morning. No, that would have been too easy. I stayed. I brewed coffee like I always did, folded laundry, picked up toys, sewed a button back on my grandson's jacket. No one asked. I just did. And I said nothing. 2 days later, they packed up for a weekend away, a little family getaway. I wasn't invited. Samantha mentioned something about needing space, a couple's weekend. Jason still wouldn't look me in the eye. That's when I packed. 1 small suitcase, a folder of documents, my rosary, and my leather-bound notebook. I didn't leave a note, just placed the house key on the kitchen table, beside a clean folded dish towel. I'd washed it that morning, took the bus, no cab, no help, just me and my aching knees. The care home wasn't anything grand, cheap, really, one of the few that was clean and didn't smell like old regrets. The woman at the front desk handed me a form without asking questions. Maybe she didn't need to. I smiled politely, said something about needing some peace and quiet, and that it was just temporary. But inside, I felt hollow. That night, I sat on the bed, narrow, firm, hospital white, and stared at a window that only offered a shadow of a tree. And I wondered, was I really just a burden? Had I become nothing more than someone who eats? That thought lingered well into the night. But then another voice stirred, soft, unfamiliar. What if they're wrong? The next morning I made myself tea, exactly how I like it, wrapped up in the blanket I had crocheted 2 winters ago, and I picked up the phone. "James," I said, my voice unsteady. It had been years. He was my husband's oldest friend, our lawyer, the one who helped with the will, the insurance, the deed. "Do you remember the paperwork for the house?" I asked. There was a pause, then a low reply. "Yes, I remember it all." 3 days later, I sat in his office. The same leather smell, the same dust-covered shelves. He opened a folder, pushed it across to me. "You should have received a copy," he said. And there it was. My name, the house address. A signature, the deed. It had been mine, solely mine, since 1994, signed over by my husband before he died. "I never told anyone," I whispered. James gave a small smile. "Maybe now you should." I held the folder, my hands steady now. I didn't yet know what I'd do, only that I wasn't just someone who ate. And I wouldn't let that be how I was remembered. 3 days after I walked away from that house, I stood in front of a building I hadn't entered in over 10 years. The brass letters still bore his name, James Callahan, attorney at law. They had played baseball together, he and my husband, shared classrooms, beers, and secrets. James had helped us with everything legal, the wills, the insurance, the deed. Back when everything felt fragile. I sat in the same chair across the same desk, older now, like him. He didn't greet me with questions, just poured tea, 2 sugars, no milk. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle. "You want me to pull the deed?" I nodded. He moved slowly, unlocking a drawer, pulling out a manila folder. He placed it before me and opened it like it was sacred. And there it was. My name, the address, date, June 12th, 1994. My husband's signature, shaky but clear. Witnessed, notarized. The house was mine. Had been for 30 years. I stared at it like it was a lost photograph. "I didn't know he actually did it," I said softly. James smiled again. "He came in the week after the diagnosis. Said he wanted to protect you. Said, she built this family. She should never have to ask to stay in her own home." I touched my chest. Even dying, that man had thought of me. Not with sentiment, but with foresight. "I never told Jason," I said. James asked, "Did you think you'd never need to?" I breathed slowly. "I thought they'd always remember who I was." James nodded. He understood. "I kept everything updated," he said. "Taxes, filings, trusts, it's all solid." I looked at the deed again. Deep down, I had always known. I was not a guest. Now I had proof. I hadn't asked for handouts. I'd simply been denied my dignity. And now I had the keys. Not the ones that jingle, the ones that unlock the spirit. "I want to sell," I said. No tremor in my voice. James didn't flinch. "I'll draw up the paperwork." Quietly, I added, "let them learn from the letter." He didn't question that either. I walked out of his office, the folder pressed close like a shield. Outside, the scent of rain clung to the pavement. A bus roared by. The world moved on. But inside, I had found my balance. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't rage. It was peace. They hadn't let me live in their house. They had been living in mine. That evening, I came back to the care home with pastries for the kitchen and flowers for Helen, a quiet, kind woman who once told me her daughter-in-law made her eat alone in the laundry room. We had tea in silence. After she left, her husband had long since passed. She had raised 2 sons. She had survived breast cancer. And yet, at 79 years old, someone still looked her in the face and called her a burden. She didn't cry when she told me that, but I noticed the slight quiver in her fingers. "It's like I vanished," she said one evening, "like I stopped existing the moment I stopped being needed." Those words pierced through me and clung to my chest like a badge I never asked to wear. I knew that feeling all too well, and right then I made a quiet vow to myself. I would not die in a place that smelled of bleach and overcooked vegetables, not without leaving behind more than just silence. That weekend, I called James once again. We sat in his office, same desk, same heavy folders full of lives and legacies. "I'm ready," I said. He didn't ask for clarification. He simply nodded and retrieved the file. There was a process, titles, documents, disclosures, a property evaluation. The house was still in good shape, and in that part of town it would sell quickly. When the last set of papers was slid across the table, I paused, not out of uncertainty, but to let the memories surface. The laughter of birthdays in the backyard, the warm scent of a holiday ham wafting from that kitchen, the image of my husband lifting me over the threshold, laughing nervously about the size of the mortgage. And then I signed. My signature was steady, more so than I expected. "I want it kept quiet," I told James. "No heads up, no phone calls." He nodded once. "They'll be notified the day after escrow closes." "Good," I said. I left that office with my head held high, a bittersweet mix of sorrow and satisfaction blooming in my chest. I wasn't doing this out of anger. I was doing it because, for the first time in a very long time, I was choosing myself. That night, I slid beneath the scratchy blanket of my narrow bed and slept more soundly than I had in years. Not because I was finally free, but because I had finally done something for me. Months passed. The seasons rolled on. The trees turned gold, then bare, and the bright skies softened into the gray of fall. The day nearly slipped past me, almost, until James called. "It's finalized," he said. "The funds have cleared. The house is no longer yours. You'll get the confirmation and deposit statement in a couple of days." I thanked him, hung up, and waited. The letter must have arrived to them soon after. One certified notice from the bank, another from the real estate office, and a third, hand-delivered, giving them 30 days to vacate. That Sunday evening, Jason called. I didn't answer. He called again the next morning, and again, and again. Eventually, I replied. Just a short message. The sale was legal. The house belonged to me. I simply reclaimed what I once gave freely. Silence followed. Then came Samantha's voice, raw and frantic. "You wicked old woman! You sold our home!" Her tone cracked like glass. I didn't yell. I didn't flinch. My voice was calm. "No, my home. You lived there rent-free, just like I once fed you both. Now it's someone else's turn." She hung up. No apology, no thanks, only rage. That evening, I stood by the window at Haven House, watching courtyard lights flicker softly in the dusk. Somewhere down the hall, Helen was humming to herself, trying to recall the lyrics of a hymn. I hadn't expected it to feel like this. Not victorious, not bitter, just still. The next morning, the phone rang again. Jason's voice was low, trembling. "Mom," he whispered, "we're going to lose everything." I didn't respond. "We have no place to go. The kids. Samantha's crying every day." He paused, then added, "I made a mistake. I should have stopped her. I should have spoken up." I let him talk. When he finished, I said the words I'd repeated in my heart 100 times. I'm not taking anything from you. I'm just reclaiming what you thought I wouldn't remember. I'm not asking for your love. I'm asking to be seen. There was a long silence. And then he asked the question I knew was coming. Can you undo it? I gave him the only honest answer. Jason, I gave everything I had to raise you. I never asked for anything in return. But the day your wife said what she did, and you said nothing, something inside me shifted. I don't want your money. I don't need your apology. I want my peace. And this is how I've chosen to claim it. He didn't say another word, and that was okay, because I had finally said what needed to be said. For once I wasn't saving anyone. I was saving myself. That evening I brewed myself a cup of tea, the same kind I used to make for Sunday breakfasts with pancakes and syrup. Only this time the sweetness was mine alone, and peace, I learned, doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it just arrives and settles quietly in your bones. Every mother has a drawer filled with more than just objects. Mine was a small wooden one, tucked under a dusty lamp in my Haven House room. Inside were old birthday cards, worn rosary beads, faded photographs, and one leather-bound notebook my husband gave me on our 25th anniversary. On the first page, in his handwriting, were the words, "For the things we never want to forget." I hadn't. That night, after Samantha's screaming had faded from memory, I opened the drawer with hands more certain than ever. The notebook still smelled faintly of thyme and lavender. It had started as a place for simple things: shopping lists, recipes, sermon notes, reminders to mail thank-you cards. But it had quietly evolved into something else, a ledger, not of blame, but of love, the kind given freely, with no expectation of return. I turned the pages. 1994, Jason's college tuition after he dropped out. 2,300. 1996, co-signed the car loan and paid the first 5 months. 1,800. 1999, emergency room bill. Jason wouldn't let Samantha's insurance cover. 740, 2001, wedding gift so they could have a proper honeymoon. 5,000, 2005. 3 months rent during unemployment. 3,600, 2008. Bought a crib and stroller for their first baby. 1,200. And it went on. 30 years of quiet generosity. Moments I had long forgotten. Until they forced me to remember. Until I was told I was a burden. I kept reading. 2011. Down payment for their second car, 4,000, 2013. Replaced a broken water heater, 950, 2015. Helped cover IVF treatments, 7,000, 2017. Paid for Samantha's dental surgery, 12,300, 2020. Pandemic groceries across 5 months, 4,500. The total, well over 120,000, maybe more. I had never tallied it before, but now they'd given me a reason to. I whispered to myself, I used to give without keeping track, but they made me count. And it broke my heart. Not because I regretted giving, but because they pretended it had never happened. I made copies, neatly labeled each page, organized everything in order, then gave it to James, my lawyer, a living will of sorts, not of cash, but of care. This isn't revenge, I told him. This is so that one day, if they ever wonder why, I won't need to explain. The numbers will tell the story. He looked at me across his desk and nodded slowly. You're not wrong, Ruth, he said. You're just finally being honest about what it cost. I smiled, not with smugness, but with clarity, because I had loved them deeply. And now I had proof that my silence wasn't absence. It was sacrifice. That night I returned the original notebook to its drawer, but I added one last line. 2023. Sold the house. Built a new one, for women like me. Called it Haven House. Value in dollars, 0. value in dignity beyond measure. I closed the book and whispered, "They thought I was just an old woman who ate, but I fed them for decades, and now, finally, I'm feeding myself." The paint had faded. The porch sagged and begged for new boards. But the house had strong bones, and the silence wrapped around it like an old friend. The agent gave me a look, one that said I didn't quite fit. "People your age usually want a retirement community," she offered, hesitant. "This isn't about luxury," I said plainly. "It's about purpose." I signed the papers that day. I named it Haven House. Underneath the wooden nameplate, I added a small inscription carved into the wood. "No one here proves their worth to stay." It wasn't meant to be just a place to sleep. It was meant to heal. For women like me, like Helen, for all the women people stopped seeing. Women who'd been labeled burdens, endured being merely tolerated, not loved, who were overlooked instead of valued. It took a few weeks of elbow grease and care. I hired Tommy, a local handyman whose mother had once been in a care facility herself. When he understood what Haven House was becoming, he gave his weekends freely. "You're building something good," he told me. "That doesn't happen much anymore." We repainted the walls, tucked herbs into repurposed bathtubs, and let the garden bloom with intention. The furniture wasn't expensive, but it welcomed you. Soft chairs, warm lighting, and a kettle always warm. Helen became our first guest. She wept when she stepped through the door. "You didn't forget me," she whispered. "Of course not," I said. "We remember the forgotten." Soon others came. 4 more women, each carrying lifetimes in the lines on their faces. Some were pushed out by their own children. Others had outlived every person who ever knew their name. There was Miss Beatrice, once a school teacher, still correcting our grammar with a wink. Marion used to own a flower shop. Now she grew basil like it was sacred. Then came Roland, our first man, a widower with hands that made better meals than any of us, and a laugh that could disarm the darkest day. I became the de facto manager, buying groceries, arranging medical visits, and helping with paperwork. Every Thursday, I read the newspaper aloud. On Sundays, we danced in our socks across the old wooden floor. One afternoon, Roland paused mid-slice of a tomato and said, "You know, we're only here because someone once called you a leech." I stopped, startled, then let out a rich, stunned laugh. "Ironic," I replied. He nodded. "You turned their insult into shelter. Most people never get that far." That night, I wrote in my notebook, "They called me a burden." But with that burden, I fed 4 souls who now sleep safely. We didn't lock our doors from the inside, not because privacy didn't matter, but because trust did. We trusted each other more than the families who'd failed us ever had. One golden evening, with the sun melting over the porch, I stood beside Helen, mugs of chamomile in our hands. "It might be okay again," she said softly. "You're not alone," I told her. She smiled. "Neither are you." And for the first time in years, I believed it. Haven House wasn't just a place with walls and windows, it was a declaration. Every shared joke, every hot meal, every nap in a sunbeam was proof. I had never been useless. I had given, endured, remembered. And now I was rebuilding. He came without pride, without polished words, only the silence of someone at rock bottom. A year had passed, but I knew him instantly. He looked older, not from age, but from regret. His shoulders drooped. His eyes, oh, his eyes, had forgotten how to hope. "I don't deserve to be here," he whispered. I didn't answer, just gestured for him to sit. "We lost the house," he continued, Samantha left. She said I should have fought harder, but I didn't know how. He faltered at the word Mom. We have nothing. I'm crashing on a friend's couch. I work nights. I came to say sorry. Still, I said nothing. Instead, I opened the small wooden box next to my chair and pulled out a photo. It showed the early days, Haven House raw and unfinished, the porch still sagging. In the center, 4 people barefoot, laughing, paintbrushes in hand, a home being born. I handed it to him. He looked down, puzzled, then realization lit his face. You built this, he murmured, with the money from our house. I nodded. And you didn't use it on yourself. I shook my head. I used it to grow something. He stared at the picture, then back at me. Why now? Finally I spoke. Because I ate your rice for 1 year, I said gently, but you ate mine for 30. This is just interest. His mouth opened, then shut. Words failed him. I stood, my knees aching, but I stood tall. I didn't come to hurt you, he said. I know. I just wanted to say thank you for everything I never said thank you for. I studied him, the stubble, the furrows time had left behind. There's something you still don't see, I said. He waited. I never needed repayment. I needed respect. I needed to know I didn't disappear just because I got slower. That the same hands that cooled your fever still mattered, even if they shook. He lowered his gaze. I forgot who you were. No, I corrected. You remembered too late. He paused, then offered, Can I help? With the house? With the others? I shook my head. This house doesn't need guilt. It needs growth. Live better. Love better. That's how you thank me. He nodded, standing slowly. As he turned to go, I reached into the box again and handed him a folded paper. It wasn't the deed to Haven House. It was blank. A fresh start. Fill it with something worth building, I said. He held it like it weighed gold. I will. And for the first time in years, I believed him. It was a soft spring afternoon, the kind where time forgets to rush. The breeze moved like a curious guest, poking through branches and stories alike. The scent of wild lilac and distant rains settled into the day like something long missing returning. I sat on the porch, teacup in hand, chipped at the rim, but shaped just for me. I watched the light stretch itself across the gravel and flagstone like it belonged there. Helen sat under the pergola, sparring with Roland over green beans, steam or sauté, garlic or bacon. Miss B was on the swing, knitting without pattern, as if her hands still remembered someone's cold neck. From the outside, it may have looked like a care home, but this wasn't about care. It was about belonging. These weren't just residents. They were stories still writing themselves. People who had given decades, silenced their wants, put others first, now finally laughing, unafraid. As I sipped my tea, a woman approached the gate. Elegant, even in her restraint. Sunday hat on a Tuesday. She walked like she used to wear heels just for fun. She didn't ask to sit, just settled in beside me on the steps. "You're the owner?" she asked. I nodded. She looked around, at the quirky garden, the bird bath with one determined sparrow, the wind chimes of old cutlery. "This place feels free," she said, like she was revealing a secret. Then she looked at me, at the tremble in my hand, the softness in my shoulders. "Why don't you live with your children?" she asked, not judging, just wondering. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence answer first. Then I smiled. "I used to," I said, "but here I'm needed, not merely tolerated. No one here asks me to clean to earn my keep. No one makes me say sorry for still breathing." Her face softened, like maybe she understood. Maybe she had a corner in someone's house too. A daughter-in-law with tight smiles, a son who stayed busy. We sat together, wordless, but full of knowing. Inside, the kettle started to whistle, a sound that had become home. Helen called from the pergola, loud and sure. "I don't care what Roland says. I will not boil green beans." Roland's laugh rolled across the garden in reply. Miss B chuckled softly, needles still clacking. The woman next to me smiled, a real one. "I think I understand now," she said. I nodded, sipping my tea. "Sometimes," I said, "walking away says more than any fight ever could."